In an old kitchen, the most powerful sound is not the radio. It is the lid coming off the pot. A slow puff of steam. A simple smell. Beans, onions, smoke, and salt. The kind of smell that tells you dinner is real, even if money is not. Because for generations, beans were not just a side dish. They were the safety net. They were the food you could store, stretch, and share. When times were hard, a pot of beans could hold a family together. And when times were good, that same pot still showed up because it tasted like home. And what many people forget is that some of the most famous meals in American history, including one served in the halls of government, started as humble bean food. We'll get to that one soon. Tonight, we're going back to the old-fashioned bean recipes. The ones written in memory more than on paper. The ones that simmered while chores got done, while kids did homework, while snow hit the windows, and while somebody tried to make a little food feel like enough. Before we start naming dishes, it helps to remember why beans mattered so much. Beans were cheap. They were filling. They lasted a long time in a pantry without refrigeration. They traveled well. And when you cooked them low and slow, they could turn into something that felt rich, even if the ingredients were plain. A ham bone could flavor an entire pot. A spoon of molasses could change the whole mood. A bit of vinegar at the end could wake everything up. Old-fashioned bean cooking was also built for real life. It was built for big families, for farm households, for working towns, for church suppers and community dinners. It was built for people who did not waste food, because waste was a luxury they could not afford. So let's open the pantry door, set a pot on the stove, and walk through 25 old-fashioned bean recipes, one by one, the way a good kitchen story should. Slowly, warmly, and with a little steam in the air. We begin with a dish that almost feels like the signature of old American bean cooking. Boston baked beans were made for patience. Dried navy beans, onion, salt pork, or bacon, and a deep sweetness from molasses or brown sugar. The pot went into a low oven, sometimes all day, until the beans turned soft and the sauce turned dark. People ate them because they were cheap, filling, and could feed a crowd. They mattered because a baked bean pot could carry a family through winter. The small detail is the crust, that sticky brown top that everyone quietly hoped to get. From Boston, the bean story moves into something even older in spirit, a pot built for work and cold weather. Pinto beans with salt pork was a classic in many homes, especially in rural kitchens. Pinto beans simmered with onions, garlic if available, and a chunk of salt pork that melted into the broth. People ate it because it was protein that did not require fresh meat every day. It mattered because the salt pork added fat and flavor, making a simple pot feel hearty. The human detail is the way the pot stayed on the stove, and anyone walking through the kitchen could lift the lid and breathe in supper. If pinto beans were the everyday workhorse, a cousin dish showed up with a little more smoke. Ham hock and white beans was built around thrift. White beans, often navy or Great Northern, simmered with a ham hock for hours. The ham hock was not a fancy cut, but it carried deep flavor. People ate it because it stretched meat into many servings. It mattered because one bone could feed a family. The small detail is the moment the cook pulls the ham hock out, picks off the tender bits, and stirs them back in, like nothing valuable should be lost. That same idea became one of the most recognized soups of American home cooking. Classic ham and bean soup was the day after miracle. Leftover ham, a bone if you had it, dried beans, onion, celery, and carrots when the kitchen could spare them. It simmered until the soup thickened and the house smelled like comfort. People ate it because leftovers turned into a full meal. It mattered because it made use of what was already paid for. The human detail is the bread on the side, used to wipe the bowl clean because the broth was too good to leave behind. And now, we come to that famous dish with a government connection, the one people rarely think about when they think about history. Senate bean soup is often linked to the U.S. Senate dining tradition, and it is exactly the kind of soup that makes sense in any big kitchen. Navy beans, onions, and smoky ham or a ham bone, simmered into a thick, simple bowl. People ate it because it was filling, cheap, and dependable. It mattered because it proved something timeless. Even important places rely on humble food. The small detail is how it looks, pale beans and dark bits of ham, plain as work boots, and just as reliable. From soup that feels official, we move to soup that feels like it belongs to the sea and the shore. New England navy bean soup often leaned on beans, onion, and pork for flavor, with simple seasoning and a thick texture. In some homes, a little potato went in to stretch it further. People ate it because it was warm and affordable in cold climates. It mattered because it fed bodies through long winters. The human detail is the way it was served, sometimes with crackers, sometimes with brown bread, and sometimes with nothing but silence and hunger, making it taste better. Now let's shift from the Northeast to a pot that feels like heat and Saturday night. Red beans and rice is an old-fashioned staple with deep roots, especially in the Gulf South. Red beans simmered with onion, celery, bell pepper in many versions, and smoked sausage or ham when available. Then it was served over rice to stretch the meal. People ate it because it was cheap and satisfying, and because it could feed many mouths. It mattered because rice and beans together made complete fuel. The small detail is the smell of smoked sausage in the steam, turning an ordinary night into something you remember. From red beans, we step into another Southern classic that carries a little luck in its story. Hoppin' John was a black-eyed pea dish often cooked with rice and pork, sometimes with onions and a little spice. Many families tied it to tradition, especially around New Year's, but it was also everyday food in hard times. People ate it because black-eyed peas cooked easily and stretched well. It mattered because it was a filling meal built from pantry staples. The human detail is the pot at the center of the table, in the sense that even simple food can carry hope. Black-eyed peas also showed up in a bowl that leaned more towards stew, especially when greens were around. Black-eyed peas with collard greens was a practical meal that brought balance. Peas for protein, greens for strength. A simple version often used onion, salt, and a bit of smoked meat for flavor. People ate it because it was affordable and nourishing. It mattered because greens brought something fresh when other vegetables were scarce. The small detail is the vinegar bottle on the table because a splash at the end could brighten the whole bowl. Now, let's move into a bean that many people grew up hearing about, even if they claimed they did not like it. Butter beans with ham, often made with lima beans, were slow cooked until creamy. Ham or smoked bone gave them depth, and black pepper did the rest. People ate it because it was filling and comforting, and because it could be made in one pot. It mattered because creamy beans can feel like luxury when meat is limited. The human detail is the way kids picked around the beans at first, then quietly went back for more once the ham flavor took over. From butter beans, we transitioned to a dish that often appeared when gardens were producing and kitchens needed to stretch vegetables into a meal. Succotash with lima beans and corn was a bright, practical mix. Lima beans, corn, and sometimes onions, peppers, or bits of bacon, depending on the home. People ate it because it used what was available and still felt fresh. It mattered because it added variety without cost. The small detail is the color in the bowl, pale beans and yellow corn, like summer captured in a pot when the rest of life felt plain. If succotash felt like summer, another bean dish felt like the church basement and the family reunion table. Three-bean salad was often made with a mix of beans like kidney, green beans, and chickpeas in some versions, dressed with vinegar, sugar, oil, and onions. It chilled well and traveled well, which mattered for gatherings. People ate it because it was cheap, filling, and could feed a crowd without heating up the kitchen. It mattered because beans became celebration food too. The human detail is the glass bowl sweating on a picnic table, the smell of vinegar rising when the lid comes off. Now let's return to something hot, smoky, and built for a hungry table. Cowboy beans, sometimes called chuckwagon beans, were pinto beans cooked with bacon or salt pork, onions, and a little sweetness or spice, depending on the cook. Some versions included ground beef. Others stayed simple. People ate them because they were filling, cheap, and perfect for cooking in a big pot. They mattered because one pot could feed everybody and still leave leftovers. The small detail is the ladle scraping the bottom because the thickest, best part always settled down there. And when you had leftover beans, old-fashioned kitchens had a way of turning them into a new meal. Refried beans, in the most traditional sense, were cooked beans mashed and fried in fat until thick and flavorful. In some homes, they were smooth. In others, they stayed chunky. People ate them because they stretched leftovers and created a new texture that felt different from a bowl of beans. They matter because they turned yesterday into today without waste. The human detail is the skillet sound, that slow, heavy stir as the beans darken and the kitchen starts to smell rich. A close cousin to refried beans showed up when cooks wanted a heartier, more full meal pot. Frijoli charros, or cowboy-style beans, often use pinto beans cooked with bacon, onion, and sometimes tomatoes or peppers when available. Different regions made it differently, and many families had their own version. People ate it because it was built from shelf-stable basics plus a little meat for flavor. It mattered because it made beans feel like a centerpiece. The small detail is the way the bacon smell hits first, before you even see the pot. Now we move into a dish that feels like a diner counter in a cold night. Chili with beans is not one single recipe, and arguments about it are older than people think. But in many home kitchens, beans were included because they made the pot bigger and the meal cheaper. A simple version used beans, meat when possible, chili powder, onion, and tomatoes. People ate it because it was warming, filling, and easy to stretch. It mattered because spice and heat can make hard times feel less harsh. The human detail is the bowl topped with whatever was available, even if it was just crushed crackers. From chili, some kitchens took the same flavors and turned them into something baked and shareable. Bean and tomato casserole was a thrift dish that often used beans, canned tomatoes, onion, and whatever seasonings were on hand, sometimes topped with crumbs. It baked into a thick, scoopable meal. People ate it because it was inexpensive and could feed many. It mattered because casseroles were built for families and leftovers. The small detail is the pan on the table, served in neat squares, like the cook wanted it to look orderly even if life was not. Now let's step into a soup that feels like the Mediterranean wandered into an American pot, especially in immigrant kitchens. Italian-style white bean soup often used cannellini beans or similar white beans, garlic, onion, and greens like kale when available. Some versions included a little tomato. Others stayed pale and simple. People ate it because beans were affordable and soups stretched easily. It mattered because it delivered warmth and nourishment without expensive meat. The human detail is the drizzle at the end in some homes, a small spoon of oil when there was any, like a quiet finishing touch. From Italy, we move into a dish that many American families knew by smell alone. Bean and bacon soup used beans, onion, and bacon, with celery or carrots when possible. Bacon was not always used in large amounts, but even a little could flavor the whole pot. People ate it because it was hearty and familiar, and because bacon made cheap food taste like comfort. It mattered because flavor can make simple meals feel satisfying. The small detail is the bacon jar or grease tin nearby, proof that nothing flavorful was ever thrown away. Now, one of the most old-fashioned forms of bean cooking is also one of the simplest. Pot of beans with onions was exactly what it sounds like, and it was common in hard times. Beans simmered with onions, salt, and maybe a bay leaf if the kitchen had one. The point was not complexity. The point was food. People ate it because it was affordable and could cook while other work got done. It mattered because it kept a household running when money was tight. The human detail is the pot lid set slightly askew, letting steam escape while the house slowly fills with warmth. Sometimes, those plain beans became something a little sharper and brighter with one old trick. Pickled bean pot, in some households, meant serving cooked beans with vinegar, onion, and pepper, letting the tang wake them up. It was not a true pickle in the modern sense, but more of a vinegar-brightened bean dish. People ate it because vinegar was cheap and could make plain food taste alive. It mattered because small changes keep morale steady. The human detail is the vinegar smell rising as the bowl is stirred, sharp enough to make you blink, but good enough to make you take another bite. Now let's shift to a dish that often showed up in homes where German and Central European habits met American pantry cooking. Bean and sauerkraut pot was a practical combination. Beans for bulk, sauerkraut for tang and preservation. Sometimes pork joined the pot, sometimes not. People ate it because sauerkraut kept well and added strong flavor when fresh vegetables were limited. It mattered because preserved foods helped families through winter. The small detail is the contrast, creamy beans and sauerkraut, a bite that wakes you up when everything else feels heavy. From there, we move to a dish that feels like a winter coat in food form. Bean stew with root vegetables often used beans, potatoes, onions, and carrots, cooked until thick and spoonable. The meat, if present, was often just a small smoked piece for flavor. People ate it because it used cheap, storable vegetables and stretched easily. It mattered because it kept bodies warm and full. The human detail is the way it thickens as it sits, and by the next day, it is even better, almost like it has settled into itself. And what came next was even more old-fashioned, because it used beans as filling, not just as a bowl food. Bean croquettes were made from mashed beans, shaped and fried, often with crumbs if there were any to coat them. Different homes made them differently. Some added onion, some added pepper. People ate them because they turned a pot of beans into something portable and satisfying. They mattered because frying changed texture and made leftovers feel new. The human detail is the crisp outer shell, cracked open to reveal soft beans inside, steam rising like a reward. Now, there's a bean dish that many people think of as modern health food, but it has older roots in simple kitchens. White bean mash on toast was a humble meal in some households, especially when bread was available but meat was not. Cooked white beans mashed with salt, pepper, and maybe a bit of fat, spread over toast. People ate it because it was cheap, filling, and fast. It mattered because it turned pantry food into a meal that felt put together. The human detail is the toast crunch under the beans, the kind of texture that makes a simple meal feel satisfying. From toast, we return to the oven, where beans often became something that could sit and hold heat for hours. Molasses baked beans, a close cousin of Boston baked beans, leaned even harder into sweetness and slow cooking. Beans, molasses, onion, and pork baked until thick and dark. Many families remembered it as a Saturday dish that cooked while chores got done. People ate it because it was cheap and lasted. It mattered because baked beans could feed a family for more than one meal. The human detail is the pot pulled from the oven, heavy and hot, set down carefully like it contained something precious. Now we move into a dish that was often made when the pantry held a can and the kitchen needed a guaranteed dinner. Skillet pork and beans in many homes started with canned pork and beans heated in a pan, then improved with onion, pepper, or a bit of bacon if available. It was not fancy, but it was real food. People ate it because it was quick and dependable. It mattered because not every day allowed for a long simmer. The small detail is the bread on the side, used like a spoon because the last sweet, smoky sauce was too good to waste. From a skillet, we moved back to the stew pot, but this time with a more old-world spirit that still fits old-fashioned cooking. Rustic bean and sausage pot, sometimes resembling a simplified cassoulet idea, used white beans simmered with sausage, onion, and herbs when available. Different homes did it differently, depending on what sausage they could afford. People ate it because beans stretched meat and made it go further. It mattered because it created a feeling of richness without expensive cuts. The human detail is the way the sausage flavor perfumes the whole pot, making the kitchen smell like you spent more than you did. Now we reach a dish that belongs to working lunches and long days. Bean and potato hash was made by frying cooked beans with diced potatoes and onion until browned in places. It was hearty, cheap, and fast once the ingredients were cooked. People ate it because it used leftovers and created that crispy texture everyone loves. It mattered because it turned scraps into energy. The human detail is the pan pressed flat and left alone for a moment because that is how you earn the crust. And finally, we end with a meal that is almost a philosophy as much as a recipe. Sunday pot beans, in many families, meant a big pot of beans cooked low and slow, served with whatever the house had. Cornbread, sliced onion, chow chow, a bit of meat, or sometimes just beans and gratitude. People ate it because a big pot could feed everybody and it brought the family together. It mattered because it created a weekly rhythm when life felt uncertain. The small detail is the table itself, everyone reaching for the same pot because sharing was part of the meal. By the time you've walked through these old-fashioned bean recipes, you start to notice what they all have in common. They're not complicated. They're not showy. They're built around time, thrift, and patience. Beans taught people how to plan. Soak overnight. Simmer all afternoon. Save the bone. Save the fat. Stretch the pot. Feed the neighbor. Feed the kids first. Make it taste good anyway. And what many people forget is that this kind of cooking was also a form of quiet care. A pot that simmers for hours is not just food. It is someone investing time. Someone trying to make a home feel steady. Someone choosing warmth and nourishment when the outside world feels sharp. So the next time you smell beans cooking, pause for a second. Listen to the lid. Listen to the gentle simmer. It is one of the oldest sounds in an American kitchen, and it carries a simple message across generations. We made it through today. There's food. There's warmth. And for a moment, around this table, that is enough. Gail Borden's invention of condensed milk was very helpful for the Union Army. 3 soldiers would also regularly drink coffee. However, it was not always entirely coffee beans. Dandelion root served as a supplement or ersatz good when coffee beans were scarce. Dandelion root was widely available and caffeine-free, tasting about the same as coffee. The fresh potatoes, beans, peas, rice, or hominy could be substituted with desiccated compressed potatoes or mixed vegetables. 1. In 1862, the ration was increased with more dried vegetables. When on the march, the short ration consisted of 1 pound of hardtack, 3/4 pound of salt pork, or 1/4 pound of fresh meat, 1 ounce of coffee, 3 ounces of sugar, and salt. Soldiers were issued 3 to 8 marching rations, which were carried in their haversack or by their unit's baggage train.